There's a lot of benefits of using Uber over a taxi. First off, Uber is a lot cheaper than using a taxi. The taxi industry is very old, it's a very old system, and it's regulated a lot. And Uber is relatively new, just like 5 years old. It's not as heavily regulated. It was actually designed to dodge a lot of the regulations that the taxi company has to hold, and because of that, it's a lot cheaper to use for its customers. Uber is also a lot more accessible than taxis. Imagine if you were going to stand outside your house and try to hail a cab. That would take forever. It would never happen. Cabs normally have a restricted area where they drive around picking people up. Uber, on the other hand, is built so you can use your phone to hail the Uber to you. So it's a little more accessible for people who don't live in big cities or need to get from their job in a suburb to a more urban area. And for the same reason, for its accessibility, Uber is also a lot safer than using a taxi. There's actually a study done by a group of researchers that show that Ubers take 10 minutes less to get to the person waiting for the ride than a taxi. Less time waiting outside on the side of the street means less of a chance of being attacked or taken advantage of. All these benefits are great for normal everyday people. They also benefit very wealthy people. And wealthy people are generally stereotyped as Uber users, which doesn't quite make sense because the people that benefit the most from Uber and the people that have the biggest potential benefit to Uber are actually the poor. There's actually an article written on this by Megan McArdle in Bloomberg called Uber Serves the Poor by Going Where Taxis Don't. And it talks about how Uber's accessibility and Uber's cheapness actually benefits the poor more than everybody else because it allows less fortunate people to get to their jobs easier if they don't have a car or another means of transport. The way that the article doesn't quite go into that Uber helps the less fortunate is actually in its drivers. Many Uber drivers are people just trying to earn a few extra dollars, but some of them are actually people who need to drive for Uber. In my personal experience, I have had 2 Uber drivers who have worked as taxi drivers before, and they quit their job because they weren't earning enough money. They moved over to Uber full time, and they're earning a much better living doing that. Now the cool thing about these 3 benefits is that they can extend way past Uber. Airbnb, for example, is another app that uses Uber's same principles to bring the benefits of cheapness and accessibility to another sector. For Airbnb, it's the hospitality sector. And there are many more apps just like this. One of them is called Leftover Swap. And Leftover Swap is where people who have leftover food and don't want to throw it away will actually post it on this app for other people who are hungry. They can come and get the food, which is right. It seems kind of weird right now, and it is. Regardless, there's an uprising of apps being made that are geared towards making products and services cheaper and more accessible everywhere. These apps are called sharing apps, and Uber is the leading sharing app in business today, and it's leading the revolution towards a sharing economy. The sharing economy is the name for the new type of capitalism that's been growing in America out of Silicon Valley for the last few years. And the sharing economy has the potential to make the economy we have now much more efficient by reducing waste. Leftover Swap is a great example of a sharing app that helps reduce waste. The effects of having a sharing economy can be huge in making everything cheaper and more accessible for everybody, the rich and the poor. So as you can see, this is huge, and Uber is leading the revolution towards a sharing economy. And now we see how integral Uber is to our future. Some just see an app when they think of Uber, but in reality, it is a sign of the future. Of course, you don't build the future without making a few enemies, and Uber has a lot of those. Enemies like the taxi unions, who see Uber as the biggest threat to their business. Those same taxi unions lobby politicians in order to regulate Uber out of business. What's most terrifying is that these taxi unions and these politicians have already begun to win the war against the sharing economy in some local political battles. That's why it's important for us everyday people to support Uber as it grows and becomes bigger as a business. If Uber is allowed to be regulated to death or protested into irrelevance, it will be nearly impossible for any other sharing app to develop and become successful. Granted, Uber has some flaws that needs to be ironed out, but so did the Ford Motor Company when the Model T came out. Imagine what would have happened if there were such powerful unions and politicians during that time. Henry Ford would have been forced to breed horses instead of build the future. So if you're feeling progressive and a little innovative during the next few days, and maybe you need to go somewhere and run some errands, I would hope that you would take a second and hesitate before you hail that taxi or call your friend. And remember, a few taps on your phone can get you a car and a ride to the future.